In 2004, Seoul police investigating a string of missing women broke into a small rooftop apartment in Mapo district. What they found looked like a studio. Tripods, lights, a digital camera, still mounted on its stand. But the walls told another story. Plastic sheeting lined the tiles, the smell of bleach heavy in the air. Inside the freezer, detectives found plastic bags labeled by date. The tenant was Yu Young-chul, a soft-spoken handyman who often told neighbors he was a photographer. According to court records, he had been documenting his crimes for nearly a year, recording the aftermath, arranging the scenes. Each image was clinical, methodical, and cold, a portrait of horror disguised as art. It began with a phone call to the Seoul Metropolitan Police. A building manager in Mapo-ji-yu reported a foul odor seeping from a rooftop apartment. He'd seen the tenant only at night, a quiet man who carried black plastic bags to his car before dawn. When detectives arrived, the door was locked from the inside. They forced it open just after sunrise on July 15, 2004. According to the official incident log, the floor was covered with plastic sheets, and the windows were sealed with tape. A camera tripod stood in the center of the room. Forensic teams photographed everything before touching a single object. In one corner they found electrical tools, surgical gloves, and cleaning agents. Inside the refrigerator, neatly stacked containers, each labeled with dates from the previous winter. Detectives noted how organized it was. Nothing random, nothing hurried. The tenant, Yu Young-chul, 34, had already been on the police radar for burglary. What they uncovered instead was the evidence of more than 20 killings committed over a 16-month period across Seoul. Court records later revealed that Yu had targeted wealthy elderly victims first, then shifted to women working in massage parlors. Investigators pieced together the timeline through his taxi receipts, phone records, and the photographs he had kept. Each image was time-stamped, processed, and cataloged like a project file. There were no expressions of rage, only documentation. When officers escorted Yu into custody that evening, he said nothing. He simply asked one question. Did you develop the photos? It was the moment Seoul realized this wasn't a crime of impulse. It was a crime of control, preserved frame by frame. Yu Young-chul was born in 1970 in Gochang County. South Korea, he grew up in poverty, the youngest of several siblings. In a home where silence replaced conversation, teachers described him as intelligent but detached, the kind of child who memorized patterns instead of people. After high school, Yu drifted between jobs, metal worker, mechanic, electrician. He married briefly, then divorced by his early 30s. He was unemployed and living alone in a small rooftop flat. Neighbors said he kept odd hours, sometimes hammering or running machinery past midnight. No one complained. In Seoul, noise is ordinary. Police later learned that Yu's fascination with photography began after his divorce. He bought a second-hand digital camera, teaching himself framing and lighting through manuals he borrowed from the library. It became both a hobby and a method of control. He told acquaintances that the camera helped him capture truth. According to psychiatric evaluations read in court, Yu displayed traits of narcissistic and antisocial personality disorder. He spoke of people as subjects and saw death as a form of cleansing society. His early targets were elderly victims living in wealthy neighborhoods. He posed as an electrician to enter their homes, using blunt instruments before stealing cash and valuables. But by late 2003, his focus changed. He began targeting women working in massage parlors, vulnerable, isolated, often unreported missing. Each new killing followed a fixed pattern: photography, disposal, cleaning. Investigators later said his precision was almost industrial, each movement deliberate. Timed, documented, the photographs served as both trophies and proof of control. Court transcripts record Yu's only statement during psychiatric evaluation: "I photographed them so I could remember what I'd done right." Following Yu Young-chol's arrest, Seoul's Major Crimes Division began one of the largest forensic operations in the country's history. Detectives cataloged more than 400 items from his apartment: digital memory cards, printed photographs, tools, and cleaning materials. Everything was labeled, logged, and stored under temperature control. Investigators started reconstructing his movements using taxi receipts, CCTV footage, and missing person reports. Patterns emerged. Every victim had been targeted within a few kilometers of his known route. Usually at night, usually alone, the camera timestamps matched the nights the women disappeared. When interrogated, Yu refused to speak for the first 3 days. Then, without warning, he began listing names. According to the police transcript, his tone never changed. He recited details like someone reading inventory. He admitted to killing 11 wealthy elderly victims and at least 13 women from massage parlors across Seoul. He explained how he lured them, recorded the aftermath, then cleaned his flat before sunrise. Asked why he documented it, Yu replied, "Because no one remembers the invisible." Forensic specialists cross-checked his digital files against missing person databases. Each folder on his computer contained corresponding dates and initials. The evidence was overwhelming: 20 confirmed murders, with multiple partial matches still unresolved. When reporters asked a senior investigator what struck him most, he said, "His calm." He spoke like he was explaining a photograph, not a crime. Yu's confession tapes later became part of South Korea's criminal psychology training materials. They are shown without sound, only subtitles, to demonstrate how composure can conceal pathology. To this day, officers who worked that case say the hardest part wasn't what he said. It was the way he smiled whenever he talked about lighting. By the time the trial opened in Seoul Central District Court, the nation already knew his name. But no one was prepared for how methodically the case unfolded. The prosecution presented digital evidence, timestamps, coded folders, and a timeline reconstructed from his own photographs. Each image was introduced under judicial seal, never shown publicly. Only to the jury, prosecutors argued Yu's actions were premeditated, organized and recorded with technical precision. He was not insane. He was deliberate. Defense attorneys requested psychiatric leniency, citing a history of isolation and childhood trauma. Court-appointed psychiatrists countered that Yu displayed clear awareness of guilt. He had cleaned scenes, hidden memory cards, and followed news coverage of his victims. In legal terms, that meant intent. For the first time, victims' families were allowed to address the court directly. A sister of one woman stood before the bench and said, "He remembered her through a lens. We remember her through what's missing." Reporters wrote that the room went silent for nearly a minute. When the verdict came, the judge's words were simple. You documented your crimes with precision. That precision proves you understood them. Yu Young-chol was sentenced to death on December 13, 2004. South Korea has not carried out an execution since 1997, but the sentence remains legally active. He has lived under solitary supervision in Seoul Detention Center ever since. Court clerks later described how carefully he listened to the sentence, no reaction. No protest, just a small nod. As he was led away, he reportedly turned to a guard and asked if he could keep his camera manuals. The request was denied. The day after the verdict, newspapers across South Korea carried one headline: "The Butcher of Busan Sentenced to Death." No photographs were printed, only an artist's courtroom sketch, his face blank, eyes downcast, for weeks. Editorials debated how the press should treat the story. Some argued that showing his image risked turning him into an icon. Others said the public had a right to see what evil looked like. Most outlets chose restraint. The photographs seized from his apartment remained sealed, their descriptions published only in court summaries. Television anchors spoke softly, emphasizing the victims' names instead of his. Psychologists appeared on nightly talk shows, explaining how obsession and isolation could distort perception. A criminologist on KBS said he collected people like photographs, not to remember them, but to erase them from real life. Public response was a mixture of anger and exhaustion. Taxi drivers refused late-night fares. Massage parlors closed early and Seoul's nightlife thinned. The fear wasn't of a copycat, it was of realizing how ordinary he had seemed. Neighbors described him as polite, quiet, forgettable. That more than anything unsettled the country. The face of violence was invisible within a year. The case inspired new police training protocols for serial offender detection and digital forensics. South Korean law schools began teaching the people versus Yu Young-chol as a study in procedural accuracy and media ethics. By the late 2010s, documentaries revisiting the case adopted a single tone, sober, almost whispered. They avoided reenactment entirely, using still photography and voiceover instead. It became a case that defined how modern Asia would tell its darkest stories, not with spectacle, but with silence. 2 decades later, the name Yu Young-chol still appears in criminal law textbooks and university psychology lectures. His crimes changed how South Korea investigates serial offenders, not through superstition or fear, but through data, digital forensics, behavioral profiling, and interagency coordination were all strengthened because of his case. In Seoul's National Police Museum, a small panel summarizes the investigation in 6 sentences, no photographs, no dramatization, just a timeline and a list of reforms that followed. Visitors often walk past it without realizing that one man's obsession reshaped an entire justice system. Forensic scholars now refer to his archive as the turning point of self-documentation. He was among the first criminals to record his own evidence, blurring the line between voyeur and witness. Modern criminology courses analyze those patterns to prevent repetition. A clinical study. Stripped of sensationalism, public memory, however, has faded. Younger generations know the nickname Butcher of Busan more than the victims' names. Each anniversary, a few online forums repost news clippings, Comments fill with disbelief that it ever happened. To them it reads like fiction. That loss of reality is, perhaps, the final echo of his control, horror reduced to content. Inside Seoul Detention Center, Yu remains under special observation. Officials describe him as quiet, compliant, still reading magazines about photography. He has never expressed remorse or sought pardon. For him, the act of remembering may still be the act of power. For the rest of the country, the legacy is caution, that documentation does not equal understanding, and that every image once created has the power to outlive empathy. It's a lesson still relevant in 2025, in a world where cameras record everything, but compassion is often out of frame. If you thought the horror ended here, you're wrong. What other dark rituals and forbidden practices are still being performed in secret? Dive deeper into the chilling world of haunted ceremonies, banned footage, and eerie folklore that refuses to stay buried. Click on the playlist to uncover terrifying recordings, lost evidence, and disturbing stories they never wanted you to see. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for weekly uploads of spine-tingling footage and dark tales that echo from the shadows. This is the Forbidden's Archive, where the hidden truth and haunting evidence come to life.